Alright, good evening, people. Welcome again to Crossroads Disc Golf. We're at the crossroads of disc golf and discipleship. So, it's kind of a weird day today because I didn't work today. Yesterday was me and my wife's first anniversary. Hooray! And we got out of town for the weekend. We went down to Fredericksburg, Texas. You guys ever been there? It's a really cool little town. Was founded at I think it's like 1854 or something like that, um, by German immigrants. So it's got a very German historical feel to it. There's lots of German food, lots of cool German stuff, culture there. But all in all, I mean, besides the German stuff, it's just a cool little town. She really enjoyed shopping. I think I did too. But the coolest thing to me was we went to the state park and they have a like a habit colony of like 3 million bats there, and at sunset you can watch them all emerge, and it's just like this cloud of bats. Like I wouldn't call it's more like a tornado because they kind of circle as they're trying to gain altitude to get over the trees and go out and do their nightly thing, and then they come back home, just before the sun comes up. Really cool thing to see and everything, and not to mention we kind of went hiking and everything in the park, and that was cool. And then Sunday, that was on Saturday that we did that. Sunday, which was our actual anniversary, just kind of spent a day on the town, and then we went out for a nice anniversary dinner. It was really cool. We exchanged some gifts and everything. And then today we drove back. We did stop on the way back. I had to get my disc golf fix, so we stopped at a place called Hill Country Fellowship. It was a big church there, and they have a 18-hole disc golf course on their property there. Really nice, really well maintained. Not incredibly difficult, but not super easy either. It had some nice technical shots. Most of the baskets, if they weren't um, located near trees or surrounded by trees or something like that, trees often came into play on basically every hole, and it made it more interesting because it was a pretty open complex, but they used the trees very wisely as far as laying it out. Had a lot of fun with that course. Um, I do, have a topic for this evening, and if you guys watched the teaser or anything, I did say that I was going to talk tonight about. I'm going to kind of do a series because there's different kind of like I guess intervals of lessons I want to kind of talk about, and tonight's more about like evidence for God, about evidence for God being real. This isn't so much about am I trying to prove Christianity? Am I trying to prove that Jesus is the one that everyone should follow? I'm just trying to give you, if you're watching this and you're on the fence, you're atheist or agnostic, or I guess if you're agnostic, you do believe in God already, but if you're just not sure and you're just thinking, science, materialism has an explanation for everything, and we don't need God. God's just what primitive man used to explain the things away that they didn't understand. I'm going to give you some stuff to think about tonight that me being a logical, mathematical, scientific minded person, this is what it took for me to make that leap from, science can explain everything to, oh, maybe it can't, there must be a God, to Jesus is my Lord and Savior. It didn't come all at once. This is kind of a gradual process, and it started for me with this is the evidence for God. Before I get into that, I want to drop a little reminder. Again, the channel is called Crossroads Disc Golf. It's the same as, I've got the Instagram and Facebook as well, and that's the name for the channel. I do want to give a different name, a unique name to the podcast. And again, we've got a contest going right now. On next episode of the podcast, on the first one in November, is going to be on, was it November 3rd, is next Monday. I'm going to decide a winner. I haven't had a lot of entries yet, so I'm just putting it back out there. Whoever wins gets this disc that we worked on and we dyed on the air on one of, I think it's like 2 or 3 weeks ago now. Um, and again, this is a Discmania Neoplastic Essence. I believe the flight numbers are 86 -21. It's never been thrown. All I've done is wipe the stamp and do the custom dye. All done by me, your favorite neighborhood ninja. If you don't know why they call me ninja, go back and watch episode 2. I talk about that a little bit. Or go back and look at some of my old disc dies on Instagram. I used to be run a company called Ninja Disc Golf. I'm sure I got something with the I got something with the logo right here. Hang on. Where you at? Yeah, there's one of my dies where I dyed my logo. Ninja Disc Golf. That was my old company. So anyway, the contest is still on. I'm still looking for a winner. Like I said, I think I've got 5 or 6 entries as far as good names. I'm gonna go ahead and rule one out because I really wanted to use this name. This is one of the first things I thought about, that I thought this was a great name. Then when I looked into it, there's already 2 regular golf podcasts that have this name already, and that's Fairway to Heaven. And that's just a great name, right? Uh, so don't suggest that one. I love the name. I would let you win for that, but it's already been taken by some other golfers that do podcasts, so can't use that one. Anyway, I digress. I'm going to kind of get into the actual topic tonight. It's weird. I put this hoodie on because every time the AC kicks on, I get really chilly in here. But I'm gonna take it off now because it's kicked back off, and now I'm warm again. Okay, so let's get into this, and let me just go ahead and start by saying this. I could talk a lot about this. To try to fit everything that is on my mind to say about this into 1 hour is gonna be difficult. I put together some notes, and I'm gonna do my best to try to explain a lot of this stuff. 2 things I want to say. The one, like I just said, there's a lot more than I can fit into 1 hour. I'd like to share a lot more like articles, a lot more videos and things like that. When it comes to videos, I don't. It's very popular for a lot of YouTubers to take other YouTuber stuff and then kind of just superimpose their face on it and be like, "It's my channel now, and I'm going to share what somebody else's work." I don't want to do that. There may be cases where I take just like a short clip or something if it's really imperative to what I'm trying to say, but I don't want to be the person that just takes somebody else's work, puts my face on it, and says, look what I can share," because it's really that other person that you're interested in hearing what they have to say, right? That's gonna be the same with me, okay? I'm an educated person, but not to the extent. I don't have a doctorate. I don't even have a bachelor's degree. I have an associate's degree in computer aided design and drafting, okay? I am intelligent. I love to study. I love to read, but I don't know. It's not like my life's work. If we wanted to talk about computer aided design programs and what I've done in my 20 plus years of my career, I'm very knowledgeable, but I don't really think that that's something I want to do a podcast about or anything. I probably could, but I don't want to. So when it comes to the stuff I'm going to talk about tonight, man, I'm not a molecular biologist. I'm not an astrophysicist. I'm not all these things that would be considered the expert in the field. So I'm going to do my best to kind of summarize the stuff that I've studied, but I'm really just kind of standing on the shoulders of other people's work and just sharing what I've learned from them. And if you're interested, I can kind of refer you to some of these resources so that you can do your own research and kind of come up with your own. Because that's at the end of the day, that's what this is about. I don't have an idea of like becoming a content creator and making money off of this. What I really want to do, I do hope that if you like what I have to say, that you will like and subscribe. That way it increases the message getting out to more people, but only because I want more people to experience what I've experienced, because I went through most of my life not knowing, not caring about having a relationship with God. And once I finally gave into that and submitted to God, my life became exponentially better nearly overnight. He started immediately rectifying the disasters that I had created in my own life. The problem is I didn't come to him until I was 42 years old, and I've been through so much pain and so much hardship that I wouldn't wish that on anybody. If you just come to God and you don't fight with Him, everything is so much better because He loves you and He wants what's best for you. But let's get into talking about what evidence is there to prove that there's a God if you're someone that you just think that science can explain everything without bringing God into it. So let's start by just kind of getting the hypothesis out the way. In order for God to be real, we have to prove that miracles are real. The miraculous things happen, and that's a real thing that we can observe, right? And we could say that, well, God also does things that are just what I would call providential. He provides for you, but they're not necessarily miraculous things. Like, for example, I talk about how at one time I prayed that I would find love again, and not too long later I met Sarah and we eventually got married. Now we've got a child on the way, and I could say all of that was God's providence, but nothing about that is miraculous. You could very well be like, well, you wanted it, you pursued it, so when you found someone that was compatible, you made this thing happen. You don't necessarily need God for that. And I would have to agree with you on that, okay? I cannot prove that God did something miraculous there. It's more like something that could happen anyway, and it is what it is. But when we want to talk about what's miraculous, let me go ahead and share something with you. Let's define the word miracle so that we understand that if this exists, that means God really is real. Let me share my screen here. Pulled this up on Wikipedia. I'm not going to read all of it, but I really like what it gave for the definition of miracle. A miracle is an event that is inexplicable by natural or scientific laws and accordingly gets attributed to some supernatural or preternatural, I'm not even sure I know what that word means, or supernatural or preternatural cause. Various religions often attribute a phenomenon characterized as miraculous to the actions of a supernatural being, especially a deity, a miracle worker, a saint, or a religious leader. Um, let's go ahead and read the next part too. Informally, English speakers often use the word miracle to characterize any beneficial event that is statistically unlikely but not contrary to the laws of nature, such as surviving a natural disaster or simply a wonderful occurrence, regardless of likelihood, e.g., the miracle of childbirth. Some coincidences may be seen as miracles, and that's what I want to say there. There is a difference between a coincidence, something that's highly unlikely but is capable by natural laws to happen, and a miracle. A true miracle would, by definition, be a non natural phenomenon, leading many writers to dismiss miracles as physically impossible, that is, requiring violation of established laws of physics within their domain of validity, or impossible to confirm by their nature because all possible physical mechanisms can never be ruled out. The former position is expressed, for instance, by Thomas Jefferson and the latter by David Hume. Theologians typically say that with divine providence, God regularly works through nature, yet, as a creator, may work without, above, or against it as well. In other words, if God is real, he can do things that violate natural law, laws of physics. Okay? And that's what I want to talk about tonight. We're going to look at I want to look at three different things, different fields here, ideologies that I want you to kind of think about and do your own research by all means. I don't want you to just be like, well, the dude on the disc golf channel told me this, so it must be true. Like I said a second ago, I have an associate's degree in design. Like, I'm not a scientist, so just because I'm telling you this, what I'm doing is I'm encouraging you to go find your own resources, go do your own research, and come to your own conclusion. Okay? I'm getting some chats here. Just want to say, praise Jesus forever, hallelujah, love it. Repent, believe in Jesus Christ to receive eternal life right now. Praise the Lord. Miracle, sign, praise God. Amen. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into the 3 points I want to make. First of all, the origin of existence itself, the origins of the universe, of time, space, matter, and energy. We're going to talk about how that came to be, what the scientific theories are versus what's actually physical laws allow to be true, and why I believe that has to be miraculous. The second is the origin of life, of the existence of life on our planet, or if it does exist on any other planet, how that takes a miraculous work as well. We'll get into that as well. And then we're going to talk about the evolution of life as life changes. Evolution, the word itself just means change over time. We're going to talk about different meanings of connotations of the word evolution because I will tell you this right now. I believe in evolution, but I believe in creation because when I say I believe in evolution, I believe in adaptation over time as God designed it. I do not believe that we all evolved from a single-celled organism that we all share as a common relative, and that's the first life on this planet. We'll get into that as well. So let's start on the origins of existence. The most popular theory and another a great comedy TV show as well, The Big Bang Theory. And basically, what does the Big Bang Theory postulate? If you're not familiar with it, what it simply says, and something else you should know too before I even get into this, if you don't know this, the Big Bang Theory was originally theorized by a Catholic priest, and at the time, the prevailing scientific agreement was that the universe was eternal and it had no beginning. So they often saw him as kind of a religious fanatic and thought it was ridiculous. Now Big Bang Theory is almost used to discount and disprove religion as if the two things can't coexist, but yet it was a priest who first introduced the Big Bang Theory. So figure that out. And I think when God said, "Let there be light," that's very much a Big Bang, bringing everything into existence. Anyway, um, but what the Big Bang Theory, the working theory, postulates is that at one time, I think the current thing is 14 billion years ago, you've got all matter and all energy existing in I guess you maybe would call that a singularity, a point that is so small and so compacted, like the size of an atom, or maybe even smaller, that the pressure, the heat, the intensity of all that became too much, and it just exploded into being, right? And over time, all that random explosion and all that chaos and everything led to all the perfect order and of creation and existence that we have now. When I say it like that, it's almost like I'm downplaying it. I will say I'm not saying that it's ridiculous, but we have to think about the fine-tuning problem. And that is everything is so perfect in our universe that if gravity was a little bit too strong, everything would collapse in on itself. If it was a little bit too weak, everything would expand and out of control, and you wouldn't be able to have like stars or galaxies or anything form because gravity wouldn't be strong enough to let them form together. And like I said, if it was too strong, same thing. You'd never have everything would just collapse back in on itself, and you'd never have the formation of anything that way either. So everything is tuned perfectly. Is that a coincidence? I mean, is it random? It doesn't seem like it is, right? So that's one thing to make you think about a miraculous thing. Not even necessarily that I'm not trying to say the Big Bang Theory is necessarily false, but if it is true, who created the fine tuning of gravity, of inertia, of all the laws of physics so that everything would work out so perfectly the way that it is? Um, in string theory and multiverse theory, basically, you'll hear the term Goldilocks universe. It's basically saying like we're in the universe where everything is just right so that everything can be in existence the way it is, so just fine-tuned and just right. But what I want to further look at is does the Big Bang Theory contradict the first law of thermodynamics? If it does, then it has to be miraculous, right? If you're not familiar with the first law of thermodynamics, let me share this with you as well. All right, first law of thermodynamics is a formulation of the law of conservation of energy in the context of thermodynamic processes. For a thermodynamic process, sorry, I'm tripping on my words here. For a thermodynamic process affecting a thermodynamic system without transfer of matter, the law distinguishes two principal forms of energy transfer, heat and thermodynamic work. The law also defines the internal energy of a system, an extensive property for taking account of the balance of heat transfer, thermodynamic work, and matter transfer into and out of the system. This is the key part right here, though. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be transformed from one form to another. It is in an internally isolated system with internal changes. The sum of all forms of energy is constant. I'm not going to get into the perpetual motion thing because that's not really relevant to what we're talking about here. And again, There's a lot on all of these things. This goes on for a while. There's so much you could read about this. Like I said, it's a lot to try to cram into one little podcast. But essentially, energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be transformed from one form to another. With that being said, um, if the Big Bang Theory is true, energy cannot be created or destroyed. That energy, or so side tangent here. If you're familiar with the E equals mc squared, right? It's a part of the theory of relativity, right? It's basically saying that energy and matter can be converted one to the other, right? Given the right uh, I don't know what I'm trying to say, the right conditions, okay? Energy can become matter, matter can become energy. And we see this, right? You light something on fire, guess what? That matter is now consumed, but it becomes energy, right? Um, Essentially, that's what it's trying to say, that energy can become matter, matter can become energy, but you can't create one or the other out of nothingness. That is the first law of thermodynamics. And it makes perfect sense. You can't make something from nothing, okay? So if the Big Bang Theory is true, where did that come from? Where did that original matter or that original energy come from? Now, I'm going to prove my own ignorance here, but also my own contemplative abilities that I've had over the years and the weird stuff that I've always thought about, right? I don't know if this is a working theory. I have no idea if in the realm of astrophysics or quantum mechanics this is a working theory that anyone is talking about or thinking about. I've often wondered though, if you know anything about black holes, what you have is an event horizon and then an epicenter, and at the epicenter you have a singularity where everything is compressed into the gravity is so great that not even light can escape it, right? And that's what we know by observing it from millions of light years away, right? We know that light cannot escape it. We see things coming across the event horizon and light itself being consumed, right? So if light can be consumed, then basically everything is consumed and it is compressed into a gravity well and just smushed into oblivion. Something the size of a star becomes something the size of an atom. I've always kind of postulated and theorized that on the other side of that singularity, could that be birthing a universe? Could that be a big bang on the other side? And then you get into uh, kind of string theory and multiverses, right? So if that is a new every black hole is a universe being born on the other side, then you have these multiverse theory, right? So our universe could be birthed from another universe, and then you have a working multiverse, right? But in that answering of a theory, all you're doing is creating new questions. Does that make sense? Okay, so now I've decided what I know. Okay, for sure our universe was birthed from a black hole, and I'm just saying this theoretically. Cool. Where did the original matter or energy still come from for that original universe that birthed all the other universes? You're always going to come back to square one here. You're always going to create more questions with each answer when you're talking about science that can't fully be observed and recreated. Okay, and when we talk about origin sciences, where it's origin of universe, origin of life, uh, evolutionary processes, these are things that we did not observe in that time, and all we can do is try to work backwards and come up with theories. We'll never know for sure, so all we can do is theorize. And you're always going to, as soon as you get one answer that you're pretty sure that you can work off of, it's just going to create more questions, right? And the only thing that actually answers those questions is it's a miracle, right? Does that make sense? And if everything came into being from nothing, that's a miracle. It breaks all the laws of physics. So something outside of the natural law, outside of our universe, made it so. It kind of sounds funny when you think about God, and it's like, well, if God is real, who created God? And it's like, well, you're basing that on our natural laws. God's much like when I use my computer, I don't think there's a person inside that computer making things happen, right? I know that what's happening is because somebody outside that computer built it, and then someone outside that computer is manipulating it and using it and making it do things. God is outside of the universe. He's outside of time, outside of reality, making these things happen. He sets the rules, he sets the things in motion, and it explains everything. That doesn't necessarily mean that science can't exist and that we shouldn't pursue finding answers. We'll get back to that later. All right. Like I said, I'm already 25 minutes in. It's going to be hard for me to try to put everything I want to talk about into such a small podcast because there's so much to this. And again, this is just on the existence of God in general, not necessarily the existence of the Christian God. Is the Christian God, is the Bible the correct path to follow? I'll do that in a future podcast. So that's about the origin of the universe. Let's talk about the origin of life. Um, I guess the first question I would put out there is, can life come from non-life? Can it? Have we ever observed that in our reality? We can say, well, we've done some pretty amazing things scientifically over the past few decades, past few centuries, whatever, as far as working down at the molecular level with genetics and stuff, and we've gotten to the point where we can almost take, like stem cell research, things like this, where we can take the things that we know and create life, but we're starting from life. Okay, we didn't conjure those things out of thin air. And that's kind of what it comes down to. I don't know if you're familiar with the term abiogenesis. Let's go ahead and look at something about that. And again, this is another one that there's a lot to talk about here. This little article here is extremely long, and we won't go through all of it. I just want to go through the first part and then another part at the bottom. Abiogenesis is a natural process by which life arises from non-living matter, such as simple organic compounds. The prevailing scientific hypothesis is that the transition from non-living to living entities on Earth was not a single event, but a process of increasing complexity involving the formation of a habitable planet, the prebiotic synthesis of organic molecules, molecular self-replication, self-assembly, autocatalysis, and the emergence of cell membranes. The transition from non-life to life has not been observed experimentally. Interesting. You see that, right? We've never experimented and been able to show it, but many proposals have been made for different stages of the process. I'm going to go ahead and finish this, read this next one. The study of abiogenesis aims to determine how pre-life chemical reactions gave rise to life under conditions strikingly different from those on Earth today. It uses tools from biology and chemistry, attempting a synthesis of many sciences. Life functions through the chemistry of carbon and water and builds on four chemical families. I want to put emphasis on this. Lipids for cell membranes, carbohydrates such as sugars, amino acids for protein metabolism, and the nucleic acids DNA and RNA for heredity. A theory of abiogenesis must explain the origins and interactions of these classes of molecules. I'm not going to keep reading because again, there's so much here, but I want you to want to emphasize on these four chemical families. And let me come back to my face real quick. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. So what we're talking about here is the idea that there was some kind of primordial soup of just chemicals, just elemental molecules, don't different elements combined to create water or to create carbon dioxide or ammonia or methane, whatever the case may be, that these different molecules are now existing on our planet on a billions of years ago before anything had developed, right? There's no life yet, but we do have different chemicals, right? And somehow these chemicals arrange themselves just right to create lipids for cell membranes. They need carbohydrates such as sugars. You need amino acids for protein metabolism, and you need DNA and RNA to basically tell everything what to do. Does that make sense? Um, DNA and RNA contain genetic code, and genetic code is basically a language that tells these protein structures how to build themselves, right? And that's what life is all about. That when you look at the simplest cell, it's still extremely complicated. It has an extremely complex genetic code at the center of its nucleus in its DNA, and the RNA tells the different lipids, the different carbohydrates. And again, I'm not a scientist. I'm sorry I'm messing some of this up, but it's an incredibly complex thing, and it's the best that we've done is we've been able to create like one of these four things. I'll share that with you. Hang on, let me go back to this. It even makes a comment here. The 1952 Miller-Urey experiment demonstrated that amino acids can be synthesized from inorganic compounds under conditions like early Earth's. Subsequently, amino acids have been found in meteorites, comets, asteroids, and star-forming regions of space. And again, we could go down. This thing is really long, and it talks about the Miller-Urey experiment here. And again, we just kind of already mentioned it. They did prove that they could, under ideal conditions, again under a laboratory experiment where they got everything just the way they wanted it, they were able to synthesize amino acids, which is just one of the four building blocks very necessary. What they don't talk about is how they get those other three building blocks, how they get them to work together. And the thing about them working together, incredibly complicated. There's a great scientist. He's a biologist. His name is Fuzz Rana, and Fuzz is like it's Fuz, and then Rana is his last name. Um, and he's a believer, and he'll talk a lot about this is his life work, and he will talk so much about all the problems that arise from trying to experiment and simulate these different things coming together, and how proteins have to fold and they have to build off of one another, and all these four different combination of things have to line up. There's also the fact that they have to have right hand ones and you have to have left hand ones. This is my right, this is my left. I don't know why I did that backwards. But you need right hand and left hand versions of these, and they all have to match up with one another, and if one goes to the other, they don't work. And so many of these different amino acids and enzymes, they don't work together. Again, I wish I knew more about it. The best I can do is kind of point you to the direction of people that you could go study this or go do the research yourself and start to understand the problems about how you can get organic compounds to get them from just the basic building blocks to actually building cells. And once you can build a cell, how do you build a multicellular organism? And how do you get all these different things? It's one thing to look at a single-celled organism, like an amoeba or a paramecium or something like that, and go, that is incredibly complicated. It's still a very complex form of life. It needs so many working, moving parts, all working together, all building on one another, and that's the simplest kind of life, right? Then you got like us, right? All these different systems and functions, not to mention all the different microorganisms that we need inside of us, all built on top of each other. These are systems on top of systems on top of systems. So many different things have to come together, and the idea that all that could happen randomly, the the probability of that is astronomical. So much to the point that you start to say it's bordering on that. Like, is this possible under natural law? We've never been able to prove that it is, and it's all the data seems to say it's not. But is it just an incredible coincidence, or is it a miracle? I'll let you kind of figure that one out, right? So that's life coming from non-life. The other one I kind of will look at is evolution. And I want to just say that I kind of touched on this earlier. Evolution just means change over time. I believe in evolution, but I would prefer to use the term adaptation. In other words, natural selection and adaptation is very real, okay? We can observe that, and we have observed that, right? The fact that we took, human beings hundreds, thousands of years ago, right, took a gray wolf and over time in selective breeding, we found the traits we like, we bred them, found the traits we don't like, bred them out, whatever, to the point that we got all these domesticated dogs, and now we call them a different species, but they're still dogs. They're still canines, and that's another thing to think about when we talk about evolution and natural selection. We talk about speciation in different species, but the term species that's a human-made word, right? Um, I could get into this in another podcast, but when the Bible talks about Noah getting one of each kind put on the ark, people are like, "Yeah, dude, there's like 50 million species of animals. How did he get them all in the ark?" Ha ha ha. It doesn't say species. It says types. Okay? He didn't need a dog, a jackal, a wolf, all the all the different kinds of canines. He just needed one kind. He didn't need a horse, a zebra, a donkey. He just needed one kind of equine. He didn't need all the different kinds of bears. He just needed one kind of bear, because the original genetic information for all those different adaptations are already in that genetic structure. As a mutation occurs, and say you got, the first polar bear that started to come up with white fur, and it was less likely to be spotted by its prey, and therefore it survived better, and therefore it was able to breed more. You start seeing more and more white bears, and all of a sudden polar bears exist, right? But that doesn't mean grizzly bears went extinct. They weren't successful in the Arctic areas. They just had to come a little bit further south, and there a white bear would stick out more, and it wouldn't be successful. So adaptation and natural selection is something that very much happens, but that doesn't mean that over time a snake can grow hair. Does that make sense? We've never seen mutation cause new information to appear. We've seen it create variation. Okay, so like I said, I believe in adaptation, but I don't believe in evolution to the sense that we all evolved from a single-celled organism, and that one single-celled organism led to fungus and plants and bacteria and viruses and animals. Those are the five big groups, right? Um, I'm doing a lot. I'm reading through my notes here. I'm doing a lot of simplifying the information here. And again, I'm not a botanist. I'm not a biologist, so I can't necessarily speak intelligently in in detail about a lot of this stuff, but I can refer you to places where you could learn a lot of this stuff, because that's where I've learned it. And again, if I could go back 2 or 3 years, I was very much a person that I wholeheartedly just believed evolution was true, because that's what we were taught, and it made sense. Because I would use the fact that we bred dogs, or you see changes like the Darwin finches is a great example. That's what Darwin himself kind of based a lot of his books on. It, we observe change over time in a certain type of creature, and therefore it stands to reason that with enough time, it could continue to make all these changes. But there's a big problem with that. Let's go back to the example of the bears, right? Um, as polar bears begin to, you know, become this new species, or whatever you want to call it, from the original bear, now we have these white bears, right? You know what those white bears are not going to produce? They're not going to produce brown bears. We could also talk about a great example, is the cheetah. Um, these evolved over time from a common ancestor of just a generic cat creature, whatever it might have been, saber-toothed cat or whatever it was, right? This feline creature became lions, tigers, jaguars, leopards, cheetahs, right? Cheetahs have some very unique adaptations that no other cats have. They're the only cat that can't fully retract their claws, which seems kind of like a drawback, but it's actually good for them, because it means that no matter what, I mean, they're built for speed, they're built for running. So that those claws never being fully retracted means that they get great traction when they run. Um, the thing about cheetahs, though, is that if you look into research on it, they are the most inbred species of cat on the planet. And that's because they've lost all that genetic variability that their long lost ancestor once had. No cheetah, no matter how much you breed it, is going to make a lion, right? The more that we get specialized, the less we can go backwards, right? And what I'm trying to get to is we've never observed generational changes leading to new information. We've only seen it lead to the loss of information. So the fact that we have all this diversity, despite the fact that everything we observe shows that as this adaptation rolls on, we actually lose information. We become less likely to create new features, and yet we have all this diversity. Is that not miraculous? Is that not a great design? And again, the the smoking gun that most materialists or secularists would come back to me with is like, well, that's where mutation comes in. Mutation is something that they have done experiments, not only proving that mutation will create variation, but they can actually learn to control it if they do it right. There's a great experiment they did with fruit flies, and they were using an X-ray machine during the larval development of fruit flies, and they got to the point where they understood it so well they knew like at the certain time and certain exposure rates they exposed this thing to an X-ray machine, that radiation would create mutation within that larval development, and it might grow like it would change like their eye color. It would make them grow like an extra set of legs or an extra set of wings, something like that. But what it never did do is it never created something new. And when we talk about creating something new, what you're really looking at the genetic level is it has to create new protein structures. So in other words, the fact that I have skin, the fact that I have hair, things like this, these are all protein structures that are being built. These are billions of cells, right, that create this hair, that create this skin, that create cardiac muscles, that create striated muscles in my biceps, things like that, right? Brain cells, all the different things that make up our bodies. And across the mammals, we all have these certain things in common. But guess what? We don't have scales like a fish. No amount of breeding or mutation is ever going to have us create the protein structures that we are not mapped and coded to create. A genetic mutation might occur where I grow an extra finger, but I've already mapped to grow fingers, right? It's not like my genetic structure is creating something new. I'm never going to grow scales. I'm never going to grow feathers, anything like that, right? Furthermore, when you talk about what is proposed by evolution, um, as far as common ancestry evolution, that we all started from a single cell organism, what you need in that is you need slow change over time. The reason why that becomes such a problem is because so many structures are dependent on one another. If you know anything about giraffes, giraffes are another great example to kind of throw a wrench in things, right? The giraffe has this incredibly long neck, right? That creates a problem because its heart is still in its abdomen or in its thoracic area, whatever you want to call that. It's in its chest, right? And it's got to pump blood to its brain all the way up that long neck, right? That neck's like 12 feet long or something, right? That is a marvel of engineering, right? To be able to pump upwards fighting gravity, right? So it's got an extremely strong heart. It's got to pump super hard, and that's great. You could say, well, cool, they developed that heart. What was the first step in that process? Did it develop the long neck without the strong heart? Then it would die. Did it develop the strong heart without the long neck? Well, then it would just blow its head up from all the pressure. Furthermore, whenever another adaptation it has is that whenever it bends over to drink water and it puts its head down, now that pressure pump would blow its head up, right? This is how it is now. If it didn't have a safeguard mechanism, so it actually has like a valve that like shuts that off, that actually closes the blood flow off whenever it drinks. So it can only drink for so long. It's got to come back up and get blood back to its brain. That valve reopens. So did the valve develop first? Did the heart develop first? Did the long neck develop first? All these things are dependent upon each other. And that's just one small example. All of the more complex an organism is, the more all these structures are dependent upon each other. And we're just talking about structures on the large scope of things. When you talk about DNA down to the actual genetic level, the microscopic level, it exists. I forget exactly how it works. You have four proteins, right, that make up the genetic code, um, and they're arranged in different combinations, you have pairs, right? And all these different pairs are lined up a certain way, and that whole we've seen that genetic DNA helix thing before, right? And all that has to be two-dimensionally lined up, then it has to be three-dimensionally coiled, and as it I, I will mess this up trying to explain it. I saw a great teaching on this, and basically, it's so complicated and it's so reliant on all these different systems that it just leaves you going, how can we actually believe that this happened randomly? And we keep adding billions of years to things and saying that that's how it all happened because that's the only way we can think that randomization would actually create these things, right? But when you start crunching the numbers, billions of years isn't even enough to make the probability work out. You would need trillions, zillions of years. The numbers are astronomical and not believable at all. And the idea that there's a designer of things, and that's why we're all built the same way. We're all built on that genetic code. We're all built on DNA, but there's slight diversity, and you could say that that's the result of slow change over time, or you could say that's a result of a common designer. That's why, like say a starfish and a sea urchin have so much in common, but yet lots of differences too. They're still basically the same kind of organism, but there's still great diversity between them, and that's why we see the commonalities between us and say other primates, right? But if you start looking at the math of it, there's no way that we could have evolved from primates because we don't even have the same genetic structure that they do. We don't have the same number of chromosomes even, and that in and of itself says, well, how can that work? How does that work? So something to think about. So is it a miracle? Is there a God? The more I learn, the more I say science is only going to be able to answer so much. And again, I want to share something before I get too carried away now. I had this whole, I'm kind of just talking because I have so much to say. I had this whole thing about evolution here, but I think I'm going to go ahead and skip over that because it didn't say anything that I hadn't already said. But I want to share some things with you. Um, there's some things from the Bible that I want to draw attention to because I think in this modern time, let me come back to my faith. In this modern day, and it certainly was true when I was growing up, and I still get encountered with it a lot. There's this predisposition, this preconception that if you are religious, if you believe in Jesus, that you've thrown science out the window, right? That science and religion can't coexist because everything in science disproves religion. What I would say to that is what I presented to you now. When you look at actual science, I believe in real science. I believe in what we can actually observe, what we can actually test, what we can actually recreate through experimentation. I believe that the Earth is round because we've proven it. I believe that satellites actually orbit around our planet because we've proven it, because this thing works because of it, right? I believe in the simple fact of science that we have actually proven, right? But when it comes to these theories of origins, everything is just a theory. There's a lot of things that we cannot prove, we cannot observe. We could get more into a lot of that. Our timeline that we build things on is mostly based on radiometric dating, but radiometric dating, just about any time they've tried to collaborate it with something of a known age, it's drastically off. You take something that we know, hey, this was formed 40 years ago or whatever. See, when did Mount St. Helens erupt? Mount St. Helens erupted in, I think, 1980. So something that it was formed 45 years ago, or sorry, that's actually, yeah, 45 years ago. And when they radiometric test these rocks, 3 million years. I mean, I'm using a rough example here. You can look that up for yourself. My numbers probably aren't precise, but the simple fact of the matter is when we try to calibrate something of known age with radiometric dating, it shows that it's not accurate. Um, Furthermore, things like carbon-14 dating, that should only work on certain things based on their age. I think the max age that you can go with carbon-14 is like, say, 100,000 years, or maybe it's 10,000 years, something like that. And yet Dinosaur bones have carbon-14 in them. Well, it should be all gone if they're really 65 million or older, 65 million years or older. How is that possible? Does that mean that we should not trust radiometric dating? Well, I don't think you should. We could do a whole thing on that as well. But again, these are the kind of things that I want people to think about and not throw religious people under the bus and think that we're all morons and that we just don't believe in science. I'm not telling you that there aren't unintelligent people that worship God. Sure there are. But there's plenty of intelligent people that know the science, that know better, and we still come to the same conclusion. And I could show you plenty of quotes from genius scientists that still believe in God. Isaac Newton, Galileo, Copernicus. The great minds still believed in God and still made great scientific contributions to the world. All right, let me go back to what I was going to share with you here. Romans 1, great chapter. I almost wanted to read this whole thing, but I'm just going to read this one excerpt. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. That essentially means that God's works are clear and evident by observing the creation, right? We could talk about, the resurrection, we could talk about the different miracles that are referred to in the Bible, but people can argue against them and say that stuff didn't happen, right? We don't have proof of that. We just have a historical account that could have been plagiarized. It could be falsified, right? It could just be made up nonsense. It's all true. That you could certainly say that, but you cannot deny the existence of the creation around you. And the further you go into study of these things, as I've tried to kind of illustrate tonight, you're going to find holes in trying to understand that these things came about by just natural causes. There always comes back to there's no way this could happen unless there's a design and something before. Let's look at another verse. Psalms 111. Great are the works of the Lord, they are pondered by all who delight in them. Meaning, if you love God and you love what he's created, study it. Great are his works, delight in the study. There's nothing in the Bible that says, no, 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 don't do science. You might disprove my word. Do it all you want to. If you actually understand the word and if you actually know how to interpret it correctly, you'll never disprove anything in it. I've been trying to. I'll be honest with you. 2.5 years ago, when I first started reading the Bible, I was doing it with a basically a chip on my shoulder, I guess would be the best way to look at it. I was trying to find holes in it. I was trying to find ways that said that science disproved this because I wanted to be able to get that out of the way. I wanted to be able to say, okay, God, I've studied your word, but I don't think this is it. And meaning that I didn't necessarily think the Bible was the answer. I've believed in God for a very long time. I would have called myself agnostic most of my adult life. So I was trying to get the Bible out of the way so I could move on to something else, I guess. And I've studied other religions as well. I've studied Buddhism. I've studied uh, Islam a little bit, and I've studied Taoism a little bit as well. I don't think any of it resonates the way Christianity does because I've always been able to find holes in all of those teachings, other than maybe Buddhism, because Buddhism doesn't really teach anything, in my opinion. I don't mean that as an insult. It just Buddhism to me is more of a philosophy of a way to deal with reality and not let it get to you, if that's the best way I could put it. And you want to talk about like chakras and stuff like that. That's more Hinduism, and that's the whole thing. Buddhism is it mixes with other religions. Uh, there's two popular sects of Buddhism. One is mixed with Hinduism, and the other one is mixed with Confucianism, Taoism, essentially. And neither one of them, like I said, they become more of a religion when they mix with that other previously existing faith. but Buddhism in itself is more a philosophy of just emptying yourself and not letting things bother you. It comes down to like there's not necessarily good or evil, there's just change. I'm going on a whole different tangent I didn't want to get into, but I've studied different religions and I don't think any of them resonate with anything like Christianity does. Christianity really brought me to truth when I started studying it. There was nothing I could find that didn't coexist with science and had no problem with it. One more thing I want to share. This is 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstance, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Do not quench the spirit, do not treat prophecies with contempt, but test them all. Hold on to what is good, reject every kind of evil. Now, this is more talking about prophecy. It says, do not treat prophecies with contempt, but test them all. But therein lies the beauty of it, right? If anyone ever tries to tell me that like my religion is a cult, I would say cults don't encourage you to question everything. It says don't treat prophecies with contempt. In other words, don't think that they're all false, but test them all, right? That is basically saying don't take anything at face value. Test it. Test it against God's character. Test it against the word that you know to be true. Test it against the reality around you that you know to be true. And again, you're going to run into things that require miracles, right? You can't say that, someone walking on water is not a miracle. Someone resurrecting from the dead is not a miracle. You can't say that Moses parting the Red Sea is not a miracle. So you have to accept that as miraculous, and then and because of that, saying that, well, I'm testing that against natural law and I find that to be false. And again, you could throw it out. But if you do, then you have to throw out all of existence and all of reality based on what I'm saying, because you can't have the existence of the universe without a miraculous event. You can't have the origins of life without a miraculous event taking place, and you can't have evolving and adapting over time without the miraculous design that's encoded into all of us. Let's talk more about that. This is something that's going on in the current event scene things right now. I don't know if any of you guys have heard about the Atlas. Was it 3i Atlas? Right. This is maybe a comet. It's some kind of thing that they discovered. And there's this guy. His name is, I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong. I think it's Avi Loeb, and he put this paper out. Basically, let me just read a little bit of it to you, and we'll talk about it. This morning, the Times of London published an excellent article about my open-minded view on the nature of the new interstellar object 3i Atlas, as well as a video interview. The reporter messaged me that he spent half an hour telling the story to his children. They were absolutely gripped, he wrote. In a follow-up interview, I asked myself, will I be happier if future data on 3i Atlas in the next couple of months shows it to be a natural comet rather than a spacecraft? My answer was, yes, I would be relieved to know that it is an icy rock, because in that case, humanity will not face any risk. I'm not going to read any more of that because it's a lot. But if you don't know what they're talking about with this 3i Atlas comet or whatever it is, right? It's basically, they're saying that it's an object going through our solar system that is not from our solar system. I forget how they determine that, but essentially, this is what I want to pose to you. There's a couple of reasons why this guy has proposed that it could be an alien spacecraft, right? Two main things. One is that it's emitting some kind of compound that really we've never seen it found in anything natural, any natural celestial body that's just a comet or something like that, right? We've only really seen it as a uh, result of like modern industrial processes, right? I forgot what the different things are. It's a mixture of like nickel and iron in like a gaseous form or something like that. Something weird like that, right? That's one of the reasons, because it's emitting something that they've never seen a comet emit before. The other thing that it's doing is it's producing a tail, which most comets do, and when comets pass near the sun. What will happen is that tail goes away from the sun. In other words, it's the sun's cosmic rays and heat that's hitting that thing, and it's pushing that tail of ice. And you would think, let's say the comet's going this way, right? Coming this way, and you would think like the tail would go that direction because it's almost like that's the way it's going, so it's going to lead a tracer from where it came. But that's not how that actually works, because again, we're not. It's not in an atmosphere. It's in a vacuum, so it's not like the air resistance is pushing the stuff off of it. It's the heat from the sun. So as it's going this way, and say the sun's where my screen is, right? That tail is going to be coming off towards me away from the sun, right? What this 3i Atlas thing is doing is that tail's actually going towards the sun. And that's where they're kind of theorizing. Maybe it's some kind of retro rocket or something, or it's sending probes out for samples or something. They don't know, but they're theorizing that that's something not normal, right? They've never seen a tail go towards the sun. It should be the sun pushing this stuff away from it, right? That as the ice or whatever is melting off of it, that's where it would go away from the sun, right? Because the sun's rays are pushing it off. So because of those two things, that's where they're theorizing that this could be something that's not a comet. It could be something not natural, something made by an unknown intelligence, right? Here's something to think about. How do they view 3i Atlas? With telescopes, with cameras, right? Most of which are going to be like black and white images, right? Or maybe they're not black and white. I don't want to say that because I think that could be wrong. But the point is they're just images, right? And it's millions of light years away. Okay. The way that they know what chemical compounds are emitting off this thing, I don't know if you guys know much about astrophysics. I'm not going to say I'm some kind of expert, but I forget what the exact term for it is. It's like a spectral analysis thing, right? So you take the light that's being emitted off of it, that spectrum, and then you look at that under a microscope, okay? And when you look at the spectrum it emits under a microscope, you'll have different bandwidths of those different spectrums of color, right? And that's how they know like the sun is made up of mostly hydrogen because it emits a certain spectral analysis, right? All your different elements, all your different compounds produce different spectral, whatever the word is. In other words, when they look at it under a microscope and the different bandwidths of the different spectrums, that's how they know what it emits. So again, it's millions of light years away. They're just looking at images and they're seeing things that make them go, you know what? We've only seen it and we've only looked at certain things, but you know what? That could be a product of an intelligent designer that's not human. Here's something to think about. The genetic code. We've observed it. We've analyzed DNA. Okay. We've also observed life in all its complexity and not just life, but all the different reality of the world that we live in, the universe around us. We've observed it with more than just our visual acuity. We've observed that with all of our senses, right? And those same scientists that are going, that comet, that might be, result of an intelligent being that we don't quite understand. Those same scientists who observed the immense complexity of the genetic code, which is a language far beyond any language that we've ever created or any computer program we've ever written. It is the most complicated code we've ever seen, and it's at the heart of everyone's DNA. So what usually creates a code, right? An intelligence. So we see that code, we see the splendor of reality and all its magnificence, all its complexity, and the more that we examine it, the more amazing it becomes, right? When at first, when ancient man, I won't say ancient, but just non-modern man before the time of the microscope, right? Just looked at things. I mean, we might think that, we might have thought about cells. We might have thrown that out there, but atoms, subatomic particles, quarks, you know, all this crazy complexity down to the minute details and how everything has to work together, and the fine tuning of the universe, and how incredibly complex and harmonious everything comes together. We don't want to believe that that's created by an intelligence, but there's a rock 300 million light years away, and it's doing something funny. It's definitely an intelligence. It's definitely created by an intelligent being, right? Why is it so hard for us to give glory to God? Why is it so hard for us to realize that we are purposely, meaningfully created and designed? I hope this gives you guys food for thought, man. Again, I could talk about this far more than I already have. I've already gone a little bit over the hour that I try to keep it to. And again, I'm not the scientist. I'm not the guy that's going to break down all the minutia of this stuff. But if you want to know more, I mean, you can search it for yourself. We all got Google. I mean, you can find this stuff as easily as I can. I could recommend some great YouTube channels to go into some of this stuff. I would highly let me pull something up. There's a great movie that I would highly suggest. Um, you can find it on YouTube. It's called Is Genesis History? And again, that's going to kind of go deeper on into the reliability of the Bible and the history that it teaches. But it'll present a lot of this stuff. So many other channels I would recommend as well. And God is good, man. His creation is evident that he purposely made all of this. He designed it, and it's amazing, and I love it. But all it really does is make me more in awe of him and less in awe of his creation. His creation is amazing, but it makes me go, wow, how amazing must the creator be? All right, I'm going to stop it there. Again, I want to remind you guys, I really want to give this thing away, so give me some ideas. Drop me a comment either here on the YouTube channel or on my Instagram or Facebook, or send me a message personally. Tell me what you want me to name this podcast. We got to come up with a good, catchy name. Um, Bonus points. Maybe I'll dye you another disc if you come up with a logo design for me. Maybe I'll do it, man. I love to dye discs. I don't mind doing it. But anyway, I need a name for my podcast, and I want to send you this disc so you can hyzer it to your, I don't know, to your joy, and it'll make you say hallelujah. But yeah, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I hope this gives you something to really think about, so you'll know that, you know, we live in the creation of a loving creator. We'll get into that too. We'll do a podcast about why God is loving and where the evidence of that is, right? So anyway, until next time, may your hyzers bring you hallelujahs. May disc golf and discipleship coexist in your little part of the universe. And just may God bless you. Love you guys. Take care.